They brought me into Marotech in the fall of 2014, back when their idea of digital transformation was finally switching from fax to email. I was 30 and a little arrogant, maybe. But I wasn't wrong. The infrastructure was ancient, patched together with custom scripts and good intentions. Any serious stress on the grid, and the whole thing would shatter like spun glass. No redundancies, no predictive algorithms, just a room of exhausted engineers hoping nothing caught fire on their watch. So I built something better. I called it NetSpan, an adaptive intelligence model that could read signals across the network like a nervous system. Not just data routing. Actual cognitive pattern recognition for energy distribution. If a substation started to heat up or a corridor overloaded, NetSpan would see it before it happened, and reroute power with zero manual input. Not just fast, predictive. That was the key. I prototyped it in my apartment, then pitched it to the CIO. They didn't understand it, not really. But they understood that my system saved them $5 million during that first winter rollout. By year 3, NetSpan wasn't a tool. It was the core system. We went from reactive to resilient, the benchmark across Canada. Marotech became the company others copied from. I built a team of 14, trained them in the architecture, kept documentation tight. We had standing meetings that ran like code, clean, clear, versioned. Then came the December blackout. Toronto took a direct hit from an ice storm. Power nodes went down across the metro. While Sovar Grid and Direct Nova were scrambling with cascading failures, NetSpan rerouted 87% of our load before field teams even picked up the phones. We were the only grid up and stable in the southern corridor. That storm didn't just earn us headlines. It sealed the merger. Sovar Grid, our biggest competitor, proposed a 12-month absorption, tech first, people second. It was good for investors. Good for optics. It was supposed to be good for me, too. Supposed to be. Victor Langford, Sovar Grid's CEO, stepped in with his corporate smile and reverse-engineered charm. He shook my hand like I was a legacy system he couldn't wait to sunset. And that's when the shift started, not on paper, not in public, but in tone. In meeting invites I was no longer part of. In language that suggested NetSpan was now a collaborative platform. Then his daughter, Camille, joined as head of strategic integration. Just another title. Just another step. But something about the way she looked at my codebase, not like it was a tool, but like it was a product, made the hair rise on my neck. I didn't know it yet, but the system I built to prevent blackouts. Camille Langford said all the right things. She talked like a team player, wore the same neutral tones as the rest of us, made jokes about not understanding Python, but somehow always had opinions about the architecture stack. She was everywhere, quietly. Not intrusive, just inevitable. Like rust. I chalked it up to merger pressure at first. With Sovar Grid absorbing Marotech, people were trying to prove their value, insert themselves into critical systems. Everyone was scrambling to be indispensable. But Camille wasn't scrambling. She was circling. One night, I stayed late. My own fault. NetSpan's diagnostic matrix had run 3 milliseconds out of alignment. Nobody else would have caught it, but I couldn't let it go. That kind of flaw. That's how cascade failures begin. While running a system trace, I noticed something odd, a phantom repo with my code signature, but modified. It was being accessed off hours from an unlisted Calgary node. The commit history was scrubbed, like someone had run a custom script to falsify the logs. I froze. Someone was copying NetSpan's core model, the very thing I'd spent years perfecting. But not just copying it, cloning, retagging, cleaning my fingerprints off it. Whoever it was had full system access. I double-checked the permissions matrix. It wasn't one of my engineers. It was someone using root-level admin, an override layer. And that override had Victor Langford's name on it. The next morning, Camille showed up with coffee and compliments. "You're a magician, Evan. The system's so clean it practically breathes." She smiled when she said it. But it wasn't a compliment. It was a scouting report. I played along. Nodded. Smiled back. Then I spent the rest of the day auditing everything. I found 3 separate instances of unauthorized data pulls, system analytics, load prediction algorithms, sandbox simulations. All of it was routed through Sovar Grid shell accounts, created within weeks of the merger announcement. This wasn't prep work. This was an extraction protocol. They were replicating my work in parallel, rebranding it as SovarNova Intelligence Suite, their own proprietary innovation. Worse, I found pieces of my original logic already embedded in SovarGrid's pilot environment. At that moment, something in me cracked, not in anger, but in clarity. They weren't trying to steal NetSpan. They were stealing the proof that I ever built it. They were going to lock me out of my own invention, publicly repackage it, and sell it upstream during the acquisition like it was always theirs. And once the merger was final, I'd be expendable, erased. I sat alone that night in the server room, lights dimmed, monitor glow reflecting off a whiteboard full of system flowcharts, all of them mine. That's when the shift happened. For months, I'd believed being indispensable would protect me. Now I knew. The more essential I was, the faster they had to erase me. So I started building quietly. A shadow plan. Not sabotage, not yet. I copied my local version of the NetSpan logic tree, stripped of dependencies, and began reauthoring the prediction core under a new working title, Narrowcast. The algorithms were mine, restructured, redefined, rewound. I backed it up in 3 places, encrypted, redundant, time-stamped. Then I filed my first provisional patent. I didn't tell anyone, not even my second-in-command. The war hadn't started yet, but I could hear the tools sharpening. Next came legal IP protection, a backdoor audit trail, and something I didn't think I'd ever do, drafting a personal separation protocol. I wasn't planning an exit. I was planning a controlled detonation. Filing that provisional patent on Narrowcast didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a warning shot, a quiet line in the sand. I wasn't building a company yet. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was simply refusing to be erased. Camille kept floating through the office like a diplomat. Every word soft. Every conversation documented. She smiled as though nothing had changed, but her calendar now included one-on-ones with my senior engineers. The kind of meetings that were framed as cross-functional exposure. But I knew better. They were mining what they could before I was gone, trying to pull the blueprint from the bricks. So I made the bricks meaningless. Over the course of 3 weeks, I dismantled NetSpan's crown jewel, the adaptive logic engine, the module that made it responsive, contextual, alive. I rewrote its core under Narrowcast, refined it, extended it, and buried it in legal protection. Meanwhile, I gave Sovar everything they thought they wanted. A full-featured dummy version of NetSpan, stripped of resilience, wrapped in elegant documentation, with enough duct tape to pass any non-technical review. A mannequin system, impressive from a distance, brittle at the joints. I called it version 4.9.1. They called it production ready. I almost laughed. Victor's emails turned cooler. Shorter. The final line always read, "Appreciate your cooperation during this transition." Transition. That was their word for removal with plausible deniability. It didn't matter. They were walking themselves into a problem they didn't yet understand. The real NetSpan wasn't about clean architecture or scalability. It was about response, system logic that adapted under load, shifted protocols when stress emerged, predicted usage anomalies, and preempted them. It had survived ransomware attacks, power failures, market crashes, and always kept our clients operational. That wasn't a product. That was instinct, hard-coded over years in silence under pressure. And Sovar's version? It would break the second someone demanded more than a dashboard demo. I just had to let them keep going, give them enough rope. In parallel, I began building a second channel, quiet outreach to former collaborators, engineers who'd left for smaller firms or been ousted during the merger. I never said I was forming a new team. I just asked how they were doing. One of them, Sasha, who had helped me write the original data segmentation algorithm, replied, "Funny timing. I've been thinking about how much we left behind." That was the first crack in their monopoly. That week, I got a call from an external compliance auditor. Sovar had apparently triggered a quiet probe from IntelliSpec, a corporate due diligence firm used by several of our partners. They'd received a tip that portions of our core platform might be unauthorized derivatives. I didn't file the tip, but I'd made sure the trail existed for someone to find it. That's when the calls started coming. One from Sovar Legal, one from a partner at Vanguard Q, one from an old CTO who had once dismissed my system as too complex for scale. Now he wanted to license Narrowcast. And still, Sovar didn't blink. So I made it official. I triggered the conditional expiry protocol, a legal notice embedded in the NetSpan license that terminated Sovar's right to use any module derived from my original logic if I was removed or reassigned without intellectual compensation. The next morning, Camille stormed into my office. "No more smiles. You're sabotaging a billion-dollar integration. No, I said. I'm protecting a system you don't understand. She stared. Cold. Calculating. You think you're irreplaceable? No, I said. I think you already replaced me. You just didn't understand what I was. Now the room was shifting. The facade was breaking. Behind closed doors, Sovar had begun arguing. Victor wanted to push forward. Legal wanted containment. Marketing had already scheduled the public launch of the Sovarnova suite. Too late. Because what came next wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be strategic. It would be public. A full-stack load test of Sovar's proprietary system. One I knew would fail in less than 48 hours. And when it did, the board, the partners, the market, they'd all start asking the same question. Where's the guy who built the real thing? I didn't need to sabotage Sovar. All I had to do was let them believe the lie they built. They launched Sovarnova Intelligence Suite on a Thursday. Mid-afternoon. Headlines were pre-written, press releases coordinated, analysts briefed. I watched it happen from my apartment. Laptop open, coffee cooling on the table, terminal blinking quietly in the background. They showcased it on a slick stage, streamed globally. The new flagship platform, a collaborative reimagining of post-merger technology infrastructure. No mention of NetSpan. No mention of me. Camille took the mic in a dove-gray blazer. Calm. Polished. Confident in something that never truly belonged to her. Built with agility at its core, Sovarnova adapts to risk scenarios in real time. I nearly laughed. By Friday morning, 5 enterprise clients had migrated from the NetSpan shell instance to Sovarnova. That same afternoon, one of them, Silvertrack Logistics, pinged me directly through LinkedIn. Their infrastructure was choking under system load. Their predictive models weren't updating. Error propagation had already shut down one of their live dashboards. Did we miss something in the conversion? No. They'd inherited an empty husk. The Sovarnova system they'd been sold was incapable of auto-throttling, lacked real anomaly anticipation, and had no load redistribution resilience. I'd built those features directly into the adaptive engine, the one Sovar thought they had but didn't, because I never gave it to them. The dominoes fell fast after that. Silvertrack opened a ticket through Sovar's client services portal. 2 hours later, Ardent Farm followed. Their real-time shipment prediction matrix had frozen. Then Epsilon Aero. By Sunday, for major clients were in failure mode, publicly. Victor tried to spin it. Said the launch was a soft rollout, that unexpected traffic had stressed the system beyond expected parameters. But this wasn't stress. This was absence. The difference between blueprint and building. Monday morning, I got an email from Sovar's general counsel. Subject line, confidential, urgent. They requested a closed-door meeting. They called it a clarification review. I called it the reckoning. We met in a neutral conference space on the 47th floor of a midtown tower. Neutral walls, neutral coffee, neutral tone. Camille didn't show. Victor did. His handshake was tight. Too tight. His smile rehearsed. Evan, this is all just a bit of crossed wire. Misunderstandings. Your product is failing in public, I said flatly. That's not a misunderstanding. They danced around liability. Said Sovarnova was an independent creation. Insisted that if any components resembled mine, it was due to parallel development under shared merger conditions. I let him talk. Then I placed a flash drive on the table. Inside, hashed commit logs, derivative traces, dependency maps, a direct lineage from NetSpan to the Sovarnova Alpha build. Digital forensics that proved Sovar's proprietary platform had lifted its logic from my adaptive core. Then I gave them the other file. A licensing proposal. 1 year of access to Narrowcast in full, at an enterprise rate, plus mandatory acknowledgement of system lineage. Victor stared at me for a long time. Not angry, just cornered. He wasn't used to losing in a room without violence. You're forcing us to buy back what we already had. You never had it, I said. You had a mask. I'm offering you the original face. He looked to his legal team. No one spoke. I stood. This isn't a threat, Victor. It's a failsafe. You can fix this. Or you can watch it keep failing. As I left the room, I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. I felt precise. Like the exact right tool had hit the exact right pressure point. That evening, Sovar issued a press statement. We've entered into a licensing partnership with independent developer Evan Thorne, creator of the original NetSpan adaptive engine. No apology. No full credit. But the acknowledgement was public. And behind closed doors, I was no longer a transitioned-out engineer. I was a named entity in the architecture of their survival. I didn't celebrate the licensing deal with Sovar. There was no champagne, no victory post. It wasn't a win. It was just the exit wound stitched cleanly. They got their stopgap, their public-facing fix, their clean press cycle. What I got was ownership, full attribution of narrowcast, enterprise licensing fees structured over 24 months. And most important, liberation. Sovar's usage rights were clearly defined, limited, and time-boxed. No equity, no long-term entanglements, just the acknowledgement of where their lifeline had really come from. Camille never reached out again. Victor stayed behind the corporate firewall, too. But internally, I knew what had shifted. They couldn't operate without me anymore, and I had no intention of letting them forget it. Still, I didn't linger. While Sovar scrambled to contain the fallout, I shifted quietly into build mode. I called it Corvest Labs. No website, no branding blitz. Not yet. Just a private workspace downtown, a quiet legal entity, and a small group of people I trusted. Former engineers from NetSpan, displaced analysts from the merger, and 2 devs who'd left Sovar the moment the licensing news broke. We met in borrowed rooms, kept hours long and light, ran design sprints fueled by coffee and quiet fury. But what made it different, what made it ours, was the culture. No top-down egos. No title games. No forced loyalty. Just the shared understanding that what we were building wasn't for market share or revenge. It was for resilience. We weren't coding to compete with Sovar. We were building to outlive them. Our first project was Narrowcast 2.0, a modular prediction engine designed not just for enterprise scalability, but for adaptability across sectors: logistics, health, climate systems. It would be fault-tolerant, edge-deployable, and self-teaching. Everything NetSpan could have become if it hadn't been chained to corporate vanity. And this time, no one could strip my name from the commit logs. In the weeks that followed, inbound messages started stacking up. One from Alara Systems, a mid-tier health analytics firm. "We've been following your work. Would love to explore a collaboration." One from South Point Rail, who'd originally licensed Sovarnova, but now wanted a long-term relationship built on technical trust. Even a VC fund quietly reached out, not for investment, but for early access. But the message that struck me came from someone I didn't expect. Jules Devlin, my old infrastructure lead. The same guy Sovar had passed over during the merger, calling him too niche, too rigid. "If there's room for someone who still believes in systems that hold under pressure, I'd like to help build again." That's when I knew something was shifting. Not just for me. The center of gravity was moving. We weren't building a rival platform. We were becoming a refuge for real builders. The ones who'd been discarded when profit outpaced principle. Sovar had licensed their future. We were writing our own. By the end of Q2, Corvest had 4 clients, no press, and complete architectural control. We weren't big, but we were undiluted. And that made us dangerous, in the quietest, most unshakable way. But the final test hadn't come yet. Because if Sovar was a finished chapter, there was still one loose thread. A man named Reese Calder, CTO at Halcyon Forward, a global forecasting firm whose entire platform bore striking resemblance to the early concepts of Project Delta. My first prototype at Riverton Manufacturing, years before any of this started. The prototype Sovar had once reviewed and rejected. Now it was live, repackaged, licensed under Halcyon IP. And I had the receipts. Phase 6 was already in motion. But it wouldn't be about Sovar anymore. It would be about the deeper betrayal, the kind that doesn't just steal your code, but your origin story. And this time, the confrontation wouldn't be corporate. It would be personal. The ghost of Project Delta hadn't been laid to rest. It was my earliest blueprint, designed in a dusty lab at Riverton Manufacturing, back before I had titles or leverage. Back when I still believed good code could speak for itself. Delta was rough but ahead of its time. A hybrid forecasting model with adaptive decision layering, built for real-time manufacturing environments. Too ambitious, they'd said. Too niche. So they shelved it. Then years later, Sovar reviewed the concept during due diligence. 2 months after that, a new platform emerged from Halcyon Forward, a forecasting firm I had zero history with, but Sovar did. It didn't take much to see the lineage. Same scaffolding. Same logic tree. Even the same modular naming conventions. Except they called it PulseTrack. And their CTO, Reese Calder, had built a reputation off of it. His white papers were everywhere. Conferences. Panels. Talking about adaptive elasticity like he'd invented it. At first, I told myself to let it go. I had CoreVest. Clients. Momentum. The past was done. But every time I opened a project scope or reviewed architecture logs, I saw echoes of Delta. Not just in structure, but in intention. It had been mine. It was stolen. And it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about the integrity of authorship. I started with metadata. I compared PulseTrack's earliest builds to the 2016 Delta archives I'd backed up before leaving Riverton. The similarities weren't superficial. They were foundational. Identical variable structures. Timestamp patterns unique to a compiler I'd custom configured. Even my original error flag notation showed up in Halcyon's logging schema. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a forked repository. One Sovar had handed over. Quietly. Illegally. I could have gone public, posted screenshots, exposed lines of code side by side. But I wasn't after noise. I was after recognition. So I did something subtler. I wrote a detailed white paper called Temporal Provenance in Adaptive Systems, a reverse audit of Delta and PulseTrack, clean, factual, meticulously sourced. No accusations, just data, lineage, and a quiet challenge to the reader. Then I submitted it to Open Systems Review, a journal Reese Calder's team frequently cited. 2 weeks later, it was published. By the end of that month, whispers had started. Colleagues were asking questions on GitChain. A researcher at MIT tagged PulseTrack as a non-original fork. And one of Halcyon's biggest logistics clients? They reached out to CoreVest for a meeting. I didn't reach out to Reese. He came to me. It was a video call. Early morning. He looked tired. Maybe guilty. Maybe just caught. Look, he started. I didn't know the full extent. Sovar told us it was unclaimed tech. It wasn't. It was mine. Documented. Ignored. Then lifted. He nodded. Didn't deny it. So what do you want, Evan? A payout? A retraction? Neither. I want attribution. In your documentation. On your site. In your roadmap presentations. And from here forward, you build PulseTrack as a joint architecture. Co-authored. He blinked. You want a partner? No, I said. I want to restore the truth. The rest is yours to fix. 2 weeks later, Halcyon quietly issued a revision history update. PulseTrack's forecasting engine was built upon early adaptive model frameworks originally developed by Evan Thorne under Project Delta. No press release. No email blast. Just a quiet correction in the annals of technical documentation. But it was there. Permanently. And that mattered more than any check ever could. That evening, I walked into the CoreVest office, just 7 of us still, and watched the latest render of Narrowcast 2.1 deploy to a live beta for one of our new climate clients. It ran without a hiccup. Built from scratch. No ghosts. Jules looked over at me and smiled. Feels like we're finally out from under it, doesn't it? Not out, I said. Just ahead. Because I wasn't chasing down thieves anymore. I was building a world where the right ideas survive, even if they have to crawl through fire first. No vengeance. No noise. Just permanence. That was the real fork. Not in the code. In me.